Mr. Burry and members of the board, we do have several items for board discussion this evening. Our first two items will be covered by Mrs. Aug. She'll be discussing some courses of study and EL staffing for the 21-22 school year. At this time, I'll turn it over to Mrs. Aug.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Birding, members of the board, my first item for board discussion tonight is to introduce the courses of study for health and wellness, PE, world languages, and fine arts. And you have copies of those in your board packet. So I will give you an overview of the changes tonight, and then we would approve these at the next board meeting. And I'm just letting you know because it seems like a lot that I've put in front of you. So first, just to let you know, the revision of the course of study is something done as part of the larger curriculum review process. So Fairfield City Schools has a review cycle in place, which means we do a complete review of a content area or program every 6 years. Last year, for the 2020-2021 school year, health, PE, world languages, and fine arts were all up for review. So teams of teachers are assembled to represent grade levels and buildings, and they look at standards, they look at the course of study, common assessments, curriculum maps, and curriculum calendars, and also textbooks and resources during this process. So as part, like I said, as part of this process, the course of study is revised to reflect changes in state or national standards and to make sure courses are aligned with those standards. So let's start first with health and wellness and PE. So these courses of study saw the fewest changes. Per Ohio law, the State Board of Education cannot adopt health standards in Ohio. However, the law does direct schools and districts to include health education and other health-related topics at various times throughout its K-12 curriculum. Fairfield's course of study follows the curriculum requirements provided by ODE and also includes content from national and CDC standards. There have not been recent changes, so no updates were needed to the course of study for health. And the same is true for PE. So Ohio's PE standards are the National Physical Education Standards, complemented by Ohio-made benchmarks and indicators. And those standards were last updated in 2015, and so there weren't really any updates made. I always talk to my instructional specialists. They're a big part of this process. And so when I talked to Mr. Beidelman, he said, you know, really we didn't do very many updates. We changed a few sentences because of grammar mistakes that we didn't catch last time, and also to offer some clarifying language around a couple of things, but the changes were very minimal to those. All right, next, let's look at world languages. So this course of study was updated to reflect a few recent changes to state standards. The most recent change is the inclusion of proficiency levels in addition to grade bands. So previously, it was done by grade bands. So the reason they made this change was to emphasize developing language proficiency regardless of the grade level at which the language is learned. So, you know, you could have an 8th grader at the intermediate level, but truly you could also have a 3rd grader at the intermediate level if they have been, you know, in an immersion program or something like that. And so that was a change that the state made, and that was an update that we made in our course of study. The standards also changed the order in which the learning end goals are presented, with culture preceding communication. Placing culture standards in the first position sends a clear message to Ohio educators that the study of culture is equal to language study. So essentially what the standards are driving at is that it's equally important to develop intercultural competence and communicative proficiency. They're putting those on a level playing field. World languages also saw a greater emphasis on building learners' oral and literacy skills, and that was really an intentional alignment with Ohio's English language arts standards. So they mirrored what we do in English language arts also in our world language studies. And finally, the Fine Arts course of study. So this course of study includes performing arts, music, and visual arts. Only music and visual arts were updated this past year. Performing arts, so the drama and theater courses and standards, they're reviewed as part of the 9 through 12 English language arts cycle, so they'll be reviewed in the next couple of years when that comes up. So this course of study was updated to reflect new 2021 state standards. These are pretty new, well, obviously new standards, but they haven't been updated since 2012. I thought that was interesting. So it reflects the changes to the standards, but also includes the creation of 2 new advanced offerings at the high school. We created an advanced painting course and a ceramics 2 course. So this concludes my overview of the course of study changes. Do you have any questions for me tonight?
Any questions for Mrs. Aug? It's a lot of work. It's hard to go through.
And I have, a wonderful team of people who lead this. We have instructional specialists in those content areas who help to put together the teacher teams, and they lead that work throughout the year. So I appreciate them and all of the teachers who were involved. It's quite a bit of work.
For sure. Thank you very much.
So my other item for board discussion tonight is about the number of English learner tutors we anticipate needing for the upcoming school year. As you know, our EL numbers have steadily increased over the past several years, and this year is going to follow suit. So to determine the amount of staffing, we use the 2018 board-approved staffing ratios as a guideline for making recommendations. And those ratios are included at the bottom of the attachment I provided to you in your board packet. So at this time, our anticipated numbers indicate that we will need to hire an additional 7 EL tutors to meet student needs this year. So I'm bringing this to you now in early August so that we can begin hiring additional tutors as soon as possible. So even hiring for our replacement positions right now, tutors who chose to not come back or maybe moved into a different position in the district is proving to be somewhat difficult. So we want to be prepared. So once we finalize these numbers, and these numbers I'm talking about are the possible EL number totals in that column. Once we finalize those, once those numbers are confirmed through transfer records or through screening that's done at the very beginning of the school year, we want to be able to get good quality people into those positions. So we are excited to see our program numbers increase and want to make sure we have the staff in place to support our English learners. So the recommendation is to add an additional 7 for this school year. So that concludes my item for board discussion. Questions?
Questions?
Yeah, so clearly there's a need for 7 more EL, but what if Central was down and Compass was up? If that was the scenario, we would just transfer bodies, and that
Yes.
they're pretty flexible that way?
Yes. Yeah, our EL tutors are hourly employees. They're, we can kind of shift them wherever we need them during the school year. So, so we would just do that, and that's why right now we're holding off on hiring them, but as soon as we know these numbers are solidified, we want to go out and get people into those positions.
Sure. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, well, thank you very much. Would you need anything from us? Okay, that's great, thank you.
Head nod.
Yep, head nod. Okay. Mr. Smith?
All right, thank you. Our next item for board discussion is our book study. And if you look, well, first of all, you should have a copy of your book nearby, The Power of Positive Leadership by John Gordon. I was telling Mr. Begley when he arrived this evening, I feel like it's an appropriate time to have some positivity in our lives, so looking forward to reading this book together. Inside your folder, you should have a schedule for our reading and discussion. Our first discussion will be on November 4th, chapters 1 through 4, pages 1 through 43. And if you remember from our previous book studies, our prompts are I read, I noticed, and I wondered. Any questions about that?
Yeah, I do notice that you gave the administrators a little bit longer time to get to through that. You gave them a couple extra weeks.
Yeah, it's all about their scheduled meetings. They're behind you guys.
That's great. Looking forward to reading it.
All right.
You haven't disappointed yet on your book selections.
Well,
No, true.
if you're disappointed this time, blame Mrs. Aug.
Okay.
If it's great, I'll take the credit. No, I'm just kidding. No, it's good.
That's great.
All right, thank you. Our next item for board discussion is in regard to a board policy, and I will turn it over to Mr. Martin.
Thank you very much, Mr. Smith, Mr. Birding, and members of the board. Just one policy for you to discuss with me this evening. It's policy EF/EFB. It's the Food Services Management / free and reduced price food services policy. And we're making just one simple change. Back in fall of 2019, the Ohio Revised Code was changed, and it put a lot of detailed information in it that honestly could change from time to time. And OSBA, who provides our policy services for us, felt that the addition of just one sentence, one line in the policy would cover all of that. That way, as it changes, we don't have to go back in and immediately change our policy. The line is, in addition to those required by federal law, the district complies with all state law requirements for the provision of school breakfast programs. So they feel that that policy will cover all the changes that take place regarding this. That's simple. It's just one minor change.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Martin? And as usual, you present a policy for us to look at one meeting, and then we have a couple weeks to
That's right.
go over it, and you want to approval at the next meeting. In this case, it's
That's correct.
just 10 days away, but,
Right.
okay. That's great. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
All right, our next item for board discussion is about an easement for Duke Energy located at Creekside Middle School, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Perry.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Last week, I did email some better, more detailed information in reference to this. This is a request from Duke for an anchor easement. They are doing upgrades and relocating the poles in the area. And this requires an anchor which is outside of the current easement. So they're requesting approval for that. The timeline for the work is the end of the year. We don't have a tighter schedule as of yet. I have talked to Mr. Clemens about this, and he is currently reviewing the documents as needed. And we were able to confirm with Duke that there will be no obstruction to the school. So overall, I think it's a pretty cut and dry request, which should have no negative impact for us.
This is just an anchor for the pole itself, like a wire that comes down and anchors into the ground.
Correct. That is correct.
So it's more of a grass cutting issue than
Weed eater. Yeah, I'm sure I'll hear about it from me.
Sure. Okay,
Very minor.
any questions for Mr. Perry? Okay, thank you very much.
No, thank you.
All right, our next item for discussion is Ohio School Boards Association Annual Business Meeting, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Birding.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Of course, the annual business meeting is upcoming on November the 8th, and typically, the school is required to appoint someone to serve as our delegate and vote at that meeting, and typically we have our legislative liaison do that. And so, Mrs. Shorter, would you be interested in doing that again this year?
Definitely.
Okay, and then we also have to set an alternate as well. And so is there someone here that would like to serve as the alternate in case Mrs. Shorter cannot go? It's in Columbus on Monday, November the 8th.
I'll do that
You do that?
if needed.
Okay. Okay with you, Mr. Clerk?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right, so it'll be one of our items for board action tonight at the meeting so that Mrs. Lane can send that information into OSBA. Okay? Okay, thanks. Great.